What was your worst I overslept experience? Freshman year of college, I was in an English class that met every day at 7:40 am. Probably such a bad time slot because it was a young interim professor teaching his first college class. The grade for the entire semester was based on a portfolio of papers you had written throughout. And there was no final test. The final was just to show up and give the professor your portfolio. The final day arrived and I had been out the night before, because of course I was 18 on finals week. I woke up to a clock that said 8:25. Class ended at 8:30. Now I was a decent sprinter, but it was about 3-4 miles to the classroom, so I knew there was no hope. I got up and throw on last night's clothes and sprint downstairs to consider my options. Going along the road through campus and avoiding the central quad may save time. So I turned and went all out onto the road with a hope and a prayer, and there was the professor with all the portfolios under his arm, waiting for the bus. "Hey, can you take this?" UHH. "Sure." Bless your soul. Interim professor whose name I forget. I woke up in a cold sweat realizing I fell asleep with a massive term paper due that morning, and I didn't even start it because it wasn't mentioned by the teacher, just listed in the syllabus. And my something's not right senses decided to wake me up on the day it was due at 4 am. And I legitimately threw myself out of my bed. Full speed ahead. Then my brain started to warm up and I realized that I am in a country 6,000 miles from my university. And that I graduated 5 years ago. And the professor no longer works there. I googled it. Just to be sure. I slept in until 9:30 am thinking I had an exam at 2 pm. My friend turned up outside my flat phoning me and saying "WTF you doing, the exam is at 10 am. Panicking, I got dressed in less than 2 minutes and sprinted across the campus to where the exam was being held to find out I was right and it was at 2 pm. So while I didn't oversleep, I may as well have, considering I lost my morning off. I slept through an exam and the room it was being given was high school Spanish. We had a vocabulary part and an essay. I did the vocab and for some reason decided to rest my eyes for a minute. Well, next thing I know, people are getting up and leaving. I was like, WTF. And they all said they thought I was finished, so they didn't wake me. Teacher was somewhat sympathetic and said I could work on it until the next exam period, which was 15 minutes later. So I hammered out a crappy essay in Spanish. Pretty sure she took pity on me because I got a B on the exam. In the military. Promotion results were coming out the next day. I had hurt my shoulder at the gym and the doc prescribed me a muscle relaxer. He told me to take 2, but I was talking with one of the nurses I worked with and she said to only take 1 to see how I would react to it. I took it at 7 pm the night before and woke up at 10 am the next morning. The promotion results had come at 8 am. I had a ton of missed calls and a lot of texts congratulating me. My commander was looking for me to present my certificate too. I got there at 11 am. Luckily, the nurse that I worked with had told them about the muscle relaxers. So I didn't get in trouble. It was still very embarrassing and I will never forget it. Great way to show that I deserved the promotion. I was in college and the department I was a part of decided to do a roast. It was one of the last days of the semester, so finals were here. Anyway, at the roast, someone brought homemade apple pie moonshine. Made with Everclear. If you haven't had it before, don't. Bad idea. So we're passing around a half gallon of the stuff and you can't taste the alcohol. You can only feel it warm your throat, which is nice on a cold winter night in the Midwest. I decided to leave since I had a final the next morning and I wanted to get a decent amount of sleep. I wasn't drunk when I walked out the door, but as I was walking, the alcohol must have metabolized or something, cause when I was about 4 blocks from my dorm, I woke up the next morning an hour after my final. Failed the class and embarrassed myself since my friends were in said class too. Ducking Everclear. Last day of middle school. Overslept the bus by 3 minutes. Slip on all of my clothes and run out the door to try and make it to school on foot. The school is 2 miles from my house. Almost entirely on an incline. In grad school. I lollygagged in renewing my lease on my apartment. When I did renew, someone had already claimed my apartment. So I had to move 2 doors down. They asked me for a date. I picked a Sunday, thinking that would be when my parents could help me move. What I didn't realize was that was the day before the final draft of my master's thesis was due. So we get everything moved. Then I work on my thesis. After pulling an all-nighter, I reached the point where I thought I was about done but also so tired I stopped thinking. So I decided to take a nap for a few hours. The alarm clock didn't go off, or I slept through it. I woke up 2 hours before it was due. I was freaking the duck out. I actually didn't submit it until 2.5 hours after it was due. But they accepted it and never said anything. But the stress was unbearable. My company had just merged with another company. No jobs were lost, but it deemed the higher ups it would be a great idea to rent a bus and drive us all to a big expo. Think European says, to get everyone to know each other. Bus was to leave at 5:30 am on a Saturday. I had just moved out of my parents' house and I am not a morning person. So out of fear of oversleeping, I set 2 alarm clocks, both out of reach, requiring me to really get out of bed. In the days leading up to that Saturday, I prepared as much as possible, cleaned the whole house, made breakfast that Friday evening so I would require as little time as possible on that Saturday morning, and triple checked my alarms were set. Colleague asked Friday if I could provide a ride for him as his car had broken down. He lived nearby, so I told him no sweat. I'll come pick you up at 5 am. Don't know how it happened, but I woke up at 10 am that Saturday morning. Alarms still going off and a few missed calls from aforementioned colleague. Not a good start after a merger. I dreaded the phone call to my manager. Lol. In the end, it all worked out fine, but I was really pissed at brain. Haha. Not exactly oversleeping. Someone pulled the fire alarm in my dorm during finals. I was sleep deprived and genuinely slept through the blaring siren in the hall. The fire department goes door to door with a master key and checks every room. They found me asleep. Middle of December. Middle of the night. They me line up outside with everyone else wrapped in a skimpy blanket and flip-flops. They wouldn't let me dress until the building, of 900 people, was cleared. Probably a half hour, but it felt like a week. I also got fined $50 for ignoring a fire alarm. I woke up at 1300 hours when I had a deadline by 12 o'clock. It really beats me why I didn't just turn it in before. But yeah. That was an expensive nap which costed a year of tuition. Wait, what? A year? Did you miss a thesis or something? A lot of colleges now do a model where the tuition is a flat fee no matter how many hours you take. I think the goal is to encourage you to get out of school faster rather than putter along at 2 classes a year. Essentially, they don't want 8-year undergrads. Unfortunately, that means that even if you only need 1 more class, you're going to eat the whole tuition anyway. Uni cramming for exams, so I was burned out. Figured cheat man. I'm 100% prepared and the exam isn't for half an hour. Sleep time itches, so set an alarm for 15 minutes later and passed out head down on my table. Alarm either didn't go off or sleeping me just didn't give a duck. I woke up 1 hour into the 2-hour exam and WT fed. I lived literally across the street from the science building, so I didn't even get dressed or anything. I just grabbed my calculator and keys and ran barefoot in the snow across the street into the building and sat in my boxers and wrote furiously for the hour I had left. Prof gave me the WTF look when I walked in and I just told him overslept, I'm an idiot, and the guy was nice enough that when I handed in he told me to stick around. Then gave me the extra hour in his office after cause he felt bad for me. Guy was a good guy and I got very lucky. Woke up at 4 PM for a 2 PM exam. Got into the exam hall when everyone else was handing in their exams. I wasn't allowed to write. Begged over email for a chance to write the exam. They agreed with certain conditions attached. Exam would only be worth 3/4 of what it normally is, and my final grade also capped at 70%. I finished and got 70%. Later went on to drop out anyway. I almost missed my college graduation because I had been up for days working on my final thesis. Graduation morning I was ready and was going to close my eyes for 20 minutes. I woke up and graduation was in 10 minutes. Never and so fast in my life. Not me but one of my old teachers. When he was in college he had a huge final coming up in a few days and he had already spent the last few days pulling all-nighters and cramming. The final was on a Friday. And he decided he would get some sleep Thursday morning after another all-nighter. When he woke up, he asked his roommate what time it was. His roommate said, "It's 2 o'clock. Do you wanna know what day it is?" As it turned out, he slept from Thursday morning all the way to Saturday afternoon and completely missed his final. Luckily he immediately ran to find his professor. And she told him he could take it right then and there or else he got a 0. My GF was graduating college. She was French and so a lot of her relatives took the flight over to see her walk the stage too. Well, I turned off the alarm while still asleep. I rushed to where the ceremony was and people were coming out. Terrible. Waking up in a blind panic. Getting dressed rapidly and rushing to work to arrive sweating. Only to discover I wasn't in that day. I disputed a fine and was to present in front of a judge to explain it. I arrived 15 minutes late. Hair still wet and with mismatched socks. I was struggling to attach a tie too. The judge was not impressed. Rejected my dispute and gave me a sermon about punctuality. That oversleeping cost me $600 and some dignity. In November, I came an hour late to my security job. Apparently I set my Google Home alarm at the wrong time. I felt bad because the person I relief is really nice and her husband was waiting to leave also. To make things worse she told me that her other relief comes late often and one time he came an hour late and he kept calling dispatch saying that he is close by. I just started working there in October so I didn't want to be that guy shows up super late. At my first job. One night I forgot to set my alarm and overslept. I'd never been late to work before and was in tears. Convinced I was going to be fired. My mom calmed me down and got me to work. No one even cared. So I panicked for nothing. I overslept because of alarm clock failure on a morning I was to play the organ for a 9 AM funeral. When the church office called. Wondering why I wasn't there early as usual. I scrambled to get moving, making it to the church just as the hearse was pulling up to the front door to bring in the coffin. Not strictly oversleeping. But about 10 years ago, I moved from Austria to Berlin, Germany. So, as an Austrian, you're used to a whole bunch of public holidays. Austria is, at least officially, very Catholic. So every semi-important Catholic holiday is also a public one. Berlin on the other hand is the complete opposite. Very few public holidays. We recently got a new one. International Women's Day. The 8th of March. Yay. Even amongst all the other German states. They sometimes call it the atheist capital of Europe. So. Anyway. Yet another of these holidays came up. So I thought great. I can just stay in bed. Chillax. Maybe order a pizza. At around 1 PM. Just when I was about to order some food. I got a text message from a work colleague. "Hey. Why aren't you in the office?" I was shocked. What's going on? Why are my colleagues at work? So I looked up holidays in Berlin. And only then I realized that today wasn't a holiday here. So I quickly packed my stuff. Went to the office. And told them that I overslept. Fortunately, my job back then had flexi time. So all I had to do was work later in the evening. It was a hard-learned lesson about how Berlin has very few actual holidays. And never even got to order that pizza. My roommate freshman year of college turned my phone alarm off one morning and I missed a final colon. Still salty. What the duck? Did you do something to piss them off or were they just a massive asshole? Did you get to take that final later? I mean, because there's nothing you could have done about that. I have no idea why she did it. When I finally shot up in bed hours later like shit my alarm didn't go off. She told me she turned it off because she didn't think I had any finals that day. Thankfully my professor was really understanding and it was a group final for a woodworking class. So we'd already finished it. First period teacher in high school was an asshole who made a big stink when students showed up late. Me being the timid student that I was feared this heavily. So I made sure to be on time to avoid the embarrassment. One morning I woke up and realized I slept in and had very little time to get to school. I got changed in record speed and was out my door in minutes. The walk normally took about 15 minutes. I was at the front doors of the school in like 7 minutes. But the doors were locked. It was Saturday. I had stayed up all night reviewing notes for a final. Set my alarm. Planning to wake early. Get a good breakfast. Clear my head. And do some last minute reviewing. Woke up and noticed the natural lighting inside of my room wasn't right and saw that my alarm had not gone off. And my final was in like 10 minutes. I had to do a half awake panicky routine of triaging my hygiene needs. Brush hair. Put on hoodie. Run out the door in that plus PJ pants and flip flops and sprint to my classroom on the other side of campus. Got in just as the exam started. Passed it with an A. When I was in college I had to go home for a doctor's appointment one day and so I had to take the 2-hour bus ride back to Chicago. I stupidly drank the night before and woke up later than I wanted. I didn't have a ride. So I had to walk to the gas station where the bus stop is. Which was about 2-3 miles from campus and across the highway. It was really stupid of me. But it was early enough that there weren't any cars. I'm about 100 feet away from the gas station and I see my bus pulling away. I chased after it but the driver didn't see me and he pulled onto the on-ramp. I had no choice but to sit at that gas station and wait 2 hours until the next bus came because there was no point walking back to campus. I got home from school dead tired having not slept properly the night before. Just conking out then was not an option. So I decided to nap. Then get up to finish my homework. I woke up to pre-dawn light. And the clock read 7:30, exactly when my dad came by to take me to school. I loudly shouted duck. Grabbed my bag and bolted for the door. Interrupting my mom and some very confused and alarmed guests just sitting down for dinner. Not me. But a guy that lived next door to me in my college dorm. We were both in this 8 AM seminar class that was complete bullshit. This particular guy skipped all the time. To the point where he would somehow miss crucial information in a seminar class. It was kind of annoying. Anyway. He doesn't show up one Friday morning. None of us paid attention because he usually isn't there anyway. Come to find out he slept in actually by mistake this time. His alarm went off and he thought, why is my alarm going off? It's Saturday. Goes back to sleep. Around 8:30 his roommate nudges him and says, dude. Don't you have class? No. It's Saturday. It's Friday dude. Looks at clock. Duck. Guess I'm not going to my 8 AM. Goes back to sleep. In college during finals week. I pulled an all-nighter writing a paper and studying for a final. The next day. I had an hour before the final and decided to take a 30-minute nap. I somehow slept through the alarm or turned it off and went back to sleep and the only thing that woke me up was my friend banging on my door to celebrate finishing his last final. I woke up. Looked at the time. Almost cried and sprinted to the final. I got there sweaty and disheveled with around 45 minutes left. I somehow finished it and passed. If I had completely missed it, I would have had to stay on an extra semester just to get enough credits to graduate. I took a nap once around 4 PM. I worked the next day at 7 AM. I woke up and looked at the clock. It said 6:15. Holy crap, I'm going to be late to work. I got dressed in a panic and sped to work. I got into the parking lot at 6:55 PM. Wait. What? 6:55 PM? It was then I realized I only took a 2-hour nap. Thank God I didn't go clock in. Got called the night before to cover a shift someone called out for. Said yep. I'd be there. Hurry home from being out with a friend. and set an alarm for early the next morning. Well, my iPad, what I use for alarms, decided to not charge overnight, and consequently died before my alarm could go off. Woke up 2 hours after I was supposed to be there. I got called in specifically because I'm one of their most reliable workers. I sure wasn't that day. Oops.